Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating document that wrestles with exactly how we engage with the constructed realities all around us. We are going to journey from a brilliant analytical framework straight into the deepest waters of unresolvable human suffering and transition. We'll be looking at everything from the games we play and the economies we participate in, all the way to how we process profound grief and confront the ultimate nature of the universe itself.
So, let's dive right into this core question. How much should you believe in a reality that you know is constructed? Think about it for a second. We are constantly surrounded by systems that are entirely made up. Fiat currency, narrative arcs in the movies we watch, even the idea of a fixed, unchanging identity. Knowing that all these things are constructs, how deeply are we actually supposed to buy into them so we can function in society without totally losing our minds?
Section 1. The 4 levels of belief. To understand this, we use a really helpful 4-level cognitive scale. At level 1, detachment, you have zero emotional stake. You're essentially just a cynic safely standing on the sidelines. Way on the other end, at level 4, identification, the construct becomes your total reality, which means any challenge to it feels like an existential attack. But the magic actually happens in the uncomfortable middle. Levels 2 and 3, pragmatic participation and immersion. In these states, you act as if the rules matter, and you definitely feel the emotions, but you keep a hidden meta switch that allows you to remember, hey, this is just a frame.
And this is exactly why occasionally stepping out of a belief, like temporarily retreating back to level 1, is absolutely crucial. It's a maintenance mechanism. It keeps you from blindly drifting into total level 4 identification. When you step back and say, you know what? This might not be ultimate reality, you immediately diagnose if you've become too rigid. It regrounds your personal agency, turning "this is just how things are" into "I am choosing to participate in this." Plus, it helps you catch all those unexamined systemic errors in your worldview that you literally couldn't see while you were fully immersed.
Section 2. Holding fictions safely.
Now, let's scale this up to what we call load-bearing fictions. Think about money, the legal system, or large-scale institutions. These collective constructs actually require a critical mass of people operating at level 3 immersion to function at all. The stakes here are massive. In fact, a widespread slide back to level 1 detachment regarding a load-bearing fiction is literally what causes a bank run. If everyone simultaneously realizes the money is just paper and steps out of the belief, the entire system collapses in real time.
The real tension here is that those extremes are incredibly comfortable. If you slide all the way to level 4, you become brittle and defensive. Your ideology is unquestionable reality. But if you slide to level 1 and decide to act on your detachment publicly, say by refusing to pay taxes because, well, money is technically a made-up concept, you are going to get steamrolled. Because here's the catch. You can privately hold that a system is a construct with zero cost, but the moment you behaviorally opt out, you collide head-on with the coercive machinery of everyone else who is still operating at level 3. The fictionality of a system does not make its consequences fictional. The tax man is still coming, whether you personally believe in the economic construct or not.
Section 3. The infrastructure of transitions.
Now, what happens when these frames break? Well, society builds incredible scaffolding for life transitions that are legible to institutions. For example, career transitions have counselors and retraining funds. Early parenthood comes with a massive commercial and medical apparatus. Bereavement of a spouse has widely accepted grief stages and support systems. These are transitions where your role changes, sure, but the underlying frame of reality stays mostly intact, and institutions actively benefit from helping you stabilize.
But contrast that with transitions where the very frame of your reality just comes apart. We are talking about highly internal transitions, like religious deconstruction, quiet family estrangement, or the lifelong invisible aftershock of a childhood loss, like the author's deeply personal grief over losing a sibling named Sharon. Because these profound shifts offer no obvious institutional payoff, they are horribly under-resourced, leaving people completely unsheltered in the morning after.
So how do we actually help people navigating these vulnerable and visible transitions? As we learn from employment facilitation, true empathy means translating helpful concepts into their native language. For instance, some people's worldviews genuinely don't allow them to assert intrinsic self-worth. Instead of forcing them to say, "I deserve a better life," you translate it. You focus on their obligation to future clients or their stewardship of their specific skills. You meet them right inside their operating framework without demanding they adopt yours.
Section 4. degrees of mattering. For those of us trying to help or just trying to stay awake to the world's suffering without disengaging, the source text offers a brilliant coping mechanism. It separates two critical concepts. Degrees of realness is about recognizing how constructed or temporary a crisis objectively is, but degrees of mattering is totally different. That's a claim about the weight and intensity your nervous system is assigning to it. It's the vital difference between recognizing the objective truth of a crisis versus decoupling yourself from the miscalibrated maximum intensity dread that your body keeps manufacturing.
Think of it as the difference between a dial and a switch. You do not want to flip a binary switch and say, "This doesn't matter." That just leads to total apathy. Instead, you use a dial to lower the internal volume of your anxiety. You turn down that mattering signal just enough to maintain your ability to show up for your clients and your loved ones. You keep your behavioral care at full investment without letting your nervous system be entirely consumed.
Section 5. Kicking at the darkness. The text also explores the deeply jarring experience of realizing that consensus reality isn't the whole story. The author lists 3 intense encounters with this: leaving the Christian framework behind, medically addressing bipolar delusions where the reality detection machinery malfunctions, and finally, diving into near-death experience or superverse research. Theories by figures like Michael Newton and Robert Monroe suggest wild concepts, like pre-life agreements to suffer, and even layers of deception beyond this physical realm. It presents an unresolved, deeply morally ambiguous layer of reality that simply refuses to fit into a comforting box.
And that brings us to a pretty harrowing question. We desperately want global pain and suffering to have a dignified, coherent answer, right? We want it all to make sense. But what if the demand for a justifying frame, the expectation that the universe owes us a neat little story about our grief, is actually the source of our deepest anguish? What if reality just is, and it's messy all the way down?
This is where we have to practice what the text brilliantly calls epistemic hygiene, essentially keeping your mental environment clean. If a superverse theory suggests that horrific, unearned suffering was somehow chosen for the experience by a pre-life soul, you can absolutely quarantine that data. You can acknowledge the research exists, but you have the absolute right to refuse a meaning system that is hostile to your lived moral perception of tragedy. A fact can be undismissible without being allowed to govern your heart.
We can even reframe the concepts that terrify us, like the idea of a life review after death. The haunting fear of reliving the exact pain you've caused others can be shifted. Rather than seeing it as a harsh tally by a cosmic judge, which, let's be honest, is just old religious baggage smuggled back in, reports consistently suggest it's viewed through a lens of profound, contextual mercy. It's a holistic perspective, softened by unconditional love, not the hellish verdict we instinctively dread.
Ultimately, all of this means we have to live what's called a double shift. We stay deeply anchored in this reality, finding real, tangible meaning in a laughter yoga session, in helping a client find a job, and in holding a spouse like Michelle's hand. But simultaneously, right behind our eyes, we refuse to accept the muddy, unresolved nature of cosmic suffering. We help with one hand, and we kick at the frame of the universe with the other.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative posture drawn from the Canadian songwriter Bruce Cockburn. Gotta kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. We don't have to possess the final answers. We absolutely don't need a perfect cosmic story to justify our existence. We just have to keep showing up and helping others with one hand while defiantly kicking at the darkness with the other. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I want to leave you with this. What fictions are you holding loosely today? And where do you need to start kicking?
Imagine just walking around your house on a regular Tuesday. Like you feel completely secure.
Sure, you know your own house.
Exactly. You know exactly where the walls are. You know the floor beneath your feet is solid wood. But then one afternoon, the light hits the floor at just the right angle. And you realize it's not solid wood at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is actually a sheet of painted glass. And right beneath that thin sheet of glass is a sheer 1,000-foot drop.
And the physical floor hasn't actually changed in that moment, right?
Yeah.
But your psychological relationship to it is suddenly, well, permanently altered. I mean, you really can't unsee the drop.
You can't unsee it. And you listening right now, you've probably had a moment like that in your own life. You know, a moment where a deeply held belief suddenly felt incredibly fragile. Or maybe you've just paused during your morning commute and wondered how much you should really care about a shared fiction. Things like the concept of money or your career trajectory, or just the invisible expectations of society.
It's a heavy thing to realize.
It is. Well, today's deep dive is into an extraordinarily profound source text that tackles exactly this. It's a document called Truth and Helpfulness.
Right.
And our mission today is to literally map the architecture of human belief. We are looking at how we hold on to our realities, what happens when those mental frameworks completely collapse, and, maybe most importantly, how you can stay grounded when the universe outright refuses to make sense.
And I have to say, the source material we're pulling from today is intense. It's this highly analytical, yet, deeply personal dialogue. It explores the raw mechanics of truth, how we actually cope with suffering, and how we navigate these massive life transitions that just don't have a roadmap.
Yeah, think of today as us handing you the ultimate toolkit for navigating the psychological constructs of reality. So let's start building that toolkit by looking at the foundation.
Sounds good.
Because before we can understand how our beliefs break and drop us down that 1,000-foot cliff, we have to understand the mechanism of how we buy into them in the first place.
Right, how the glass gets painted.
Exactly. And the source outlines this really fascinating 4-level scale of how humans engage with reality constructs.
Yeah, and to be clear, when we say constructs, we are talking about literally anything from a sci-fi novel you're reading to a complex political worldview, to your fundamental concept of who you are as a person.
It covers everything.
It really does. So this scale maps the depth of our psychological buy-in. Level 1 is detachment. This is where you have absolutely no emotional stake. You are looking at the construct purely analytically, like a scientist looking at a bug under a microscope.
Okay, so total distance.
Right. Then level 2 is pragmatic participation. You operate inside the construct because, well, it's useful to your daily life, but you hold it very loosely. You know it's just a tool.
And then we sink a little deeper, right? Level 3 is immersion. This is where you let the construct function as real, both emotionally and behaviorally. But, and this is key, you retain a meta-level switch in your brain. You know you can flip that switch and walk away at any time.
You're still aware of the frame around the picture?
Exactly. And finally, we hit level 4, which is identification. At level 4, the construct literally becomes your reality. The frame around the picture disappears completely.
It's just reality now.
Yeah, so if someone challenges the construct, your brain doesn't process it as an intellectual debate anymore. It registers it as a physical, existential attack on your life.
Which is wild, but what's crucial to understand here is that there isn't one correct level to be at. The appropriate depth of buy-in shifts constantly, depending on the environment you are navigating.
Oh, it's contextual.
Totally. Take story and art, for example. Level 3 immersion is the absolute ideal. The emotional cost of engaging at level 3 is just experiencing a bit of mild grief when a fictional character dies.
Which is kind of the point.
Exactly. That controlled emotional release is exactly why human beings consume art. But if you drop to level 1, you become that incredibly annoying person in the movie theater pointing out the structural flaws of a spaceship.
Oh, we've all watched a movie with that person. It's the worst.
It is. And then applying level 4 to a story is genuinely dangerous. That's the territory where you start expecting the real chaotic universe to owe you a structured narrative arc.
Oh, wow. Like main character syndrome.
Kind of, yeah. You start thinking that because you suffered a real-life betrayal, the universe guarantees you a neat cinematic revenge plot, which just isn't how life works.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this with a different analogy. Let's apply this scale to something interactive, like playing a massive multiplayer video game.
Okay, I like that.
If you approach the game at level 1, you don't care about the rules, you have no real stake, and honestly, the game is entirely boring.
Right, why even play?
Exactly. But if you drop into level 4 and your brain genuinely believes you will die in real life if your avatar takes damage, the game is paralyzingly terrifying.
You wouldn't be able to move.
Right. So level 3 is that magical sweet spot. You get the adrenaline rush and the thrill of the stakes without the actual physical danger.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the mechanism. But, the stakes shift dramatically when we move away from games and art and start talking about what the source calls load-bearing fictions.
Load-bearing fictions, like what?
We're talking about money, nation-states, our legal systems. These aren't just games we play for fun. These systems fundamentally require a critical mass of the human population to operate at level 3 just to exist.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like money only has purchasing power because millions of people simultaneously agree to act as if it does.
Right. The moment that collective agreement fractures, The physical world reacts.
Violently, sometimes.
Yeah, if everyone publicly slides to level 1, looks at their bank accounts, and collectively says, wait a minute, this is all just digital numbers and paper. I mean, that is the exact psychological mechanism that triggers a bank run.
And that highlights the incredible danger of losing your double consciousness, that meta-level switch we talked about. If you slide into level 4 and identify completely with the nation or the currency as the ultimate unquestionable reality, your worldview becomes incredibly brittle.
Because if the market crashes, your actual will to live crashes with it.
Exactly. But conversely, if you slide to level 1 and decide to act on that detachment publicly, saying something like, laws are just a collective story, so I simply won't pay my taxes.
Yeah, that won't end well.
No, you will get crushed by the system. Just because a fiction is socially constructed doesn't mean its enforcement mechanisms are fictional. The machinery of the state will still physically lock you in a cell.
So if level 3 is the sweet spot for a functioning society, it implies there's this massive invisible pressure to stay immersed at all times,
Constantly.
which naturally pushes people toward that danger zone of level 4. I mean, when you uphold a fiction for so long, you forget it's a fiction.
You lose sight of the painted glass.
Right. So how do we stop ourselves from losing our grip on reality and becoming dangerously rigid? The source argues we have to build in a practice of periodically stepping out.
Yes, stepping out. Shifting back to level 1 temporarily as a diagnostic tool, think of it as a psychological checkup.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, you pause and actively introduce the thought, this entire system might not be real and it might not be necessary.
Just to see how you react.
Exactly. If that thought causes you intense physiological panic rather than just a mild intellectual curiosity, your nervous system is giving you vital information. It is telling you that you've already drifted into level 4 identification without even noticing.
But timing that diagnostic check is everything, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you try to step out of a massive load-bearing belief like the foundational story of why you got married or the ultimate value of your career right in the middle of a major life crisis, you are basically pulling the structural support beams out of your house while a hurricane is hitting.
It's a recipe for collapse. And the author warns that sometimes, once you break that magic circle of belief, it doesn't cleanly reseal.
You can't unsee the drop.
Right. That is the inherent risk of self-examination. Now consider the complexity when you attempt to pull someone else out of a framework.
Oh, that sounds tricky.
It is. What do you do when you see someone operating at a level 4 belief system that is actively destroying their life? The source provides a really brilliant case study involving career facilitation.
Okay, lay it on me.
Let's say a career coach is working with a client who severely lacks confidence. A standard Western therapeutic exercise might ask that client to look in the mirror and declare, I am worth the effort to have a better career.
Right, classic affirmations. But wait, if someone is coming from a deeply duty-based culture or a highly religious background, telling them to declare their own intrinsic worth might completely backfire.
It absolutely can.
Because if saying, I am worth it, feels arrogant to them or violates their cosmological framework, I imagine you have to find a back door. Like, do you tie their success to their family's honor or their obligations to their community?
You are identifying the exact mechanism the source suggests. You route the goal through their existing framework of obligation. Yeah. Instead of forcing them to adopt a Western framework of intrinsic self-worth by saying, I am worth the effort, you ask them to consider something else. You say, your future customers deserve someone who is incredibly good at what they do.
Wow. That completely bypasses the need for self-assertion.
It bypasses it entirely. They don't have to claim a single drop of personal worth, which might feel like a sin or a cultural violation to them.
Because it's not about them anymore.
Right. They just have to agree that other people, their community, their clients, deserve their best effort. It produces the exact same behavioral result. They apply for the job, they study hard for the exam, but it speaks their native cultural language.
I can see how effective that is. But I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
Isn't pulling someone out of their belief system, even gently, just proselytizing for your own worldview, disguised as helpful coaching?
That's a very fair question. And the source wrestles with that exact ethical boundary. It makes a very careful distinction between an invitation and an assault.
Okay, what's the difference?
An assault is walking up to someone's level 4 construct and stating, your belief is objectively false.
Just attacking it head on.
Yes. An invitation, though, is gently presenting the question, what would your life look like if that belief weren't true? You are offering a presence and a safe space to explore without making your very existence an argument against their cosmological framework.
So it's about offering them the option to flip the switch themselves.
Precisely.
But, whether you step out of a framework on your own or you accept an invitation to step out, the resulting shift in your identity is a monumental transition. And the source points out a truly shocking asymmetry in how our modern society supports these human transitions.
It really is glaring once you see it. Look at the life transitions that command heavy societal resources. Changing careers, early parenthood, the bereavement of a spouse.
The big ones.
Yeah, for these events we have grief counselors, government assistance programs, HR departments, and deeply established social scripts. The culture knows exactly what to say to you.
But then look at the transitions with thin or completely absent support. A prolonged faith transition. Or a slow, agonizing identity drift where you wake up at 40 and realize you aren't the person you thought you were.
Or the childhood loss of a sibling.
Exactly. These events can absolutely devastate a human psyche, yet you are completely on your own. Why does society care so deeply about my job change, but let me drown when my entire cosmology collapses?
It's harsh, but the reality is that the support infrastructure of a society does not track actual human suffering. It tracks institutional legibility.
Institutional legibility, what does that mean?
Institutions are essentially giant algorithms. They can only process standardized inputs. A divorce generates a paperwork trail that the legal system, the real estate market, and the tax code understand.
There's a form for that.
Right. A career change generates a new W-2. Institutions literally profit when you successfully transition and re-enter the labor market. But there is no standardized form for the quiet, decades-long erosion of your religious certainty.
Wow.
The algorithms simply cannot see your bespoke grief.
So what you're saying is the system only throws a life raft if you have the right barcode on your suffering.
That is a brutally accurate way to put it. And it is crucial to understand the precipitance of these invisible collapses.
What usually causes them?
Well, people rarely deconstruct their entire worldview just because someone handed them a philosophically superior argument. Deconstruction is almost always triggered by an event that their existing framework simply couldn't metabolize.
Right. It's a crisis where the belief system was explicitly promised to provide comfort or answers, but it just buckled under the weight of actual trauma.
Yes, or a person discovers the profound hypocrisy of the leaders who are enforcing the belief.
Or, and I think this is the most common, one, pure cognitive exhaustion.
Absolutely.
The daily grinding cost of maintaining the mental gymnastics required to uphold the belief finally exceeds the emotional benefit you get from it.
The maintenance cost just bankrupts you.
Yeah. So when you find yourself navigating one of these profoundly unsupported transitions, or honestly, if you are simply facing the overwhelming raw brokenness of the world on any given day, how do you cope?
It's the ultimate question.
How do you avoid entirely disengaging and fleeing back to the numbness of level 1 detachment? Well, the source offers a brilliant mechanical coping strategy. It involves conceptualizing your engagement as two separate dials.
And those two dials are degrees of realness and degrees of mattering.
Yes, realness and mattering.
Realness is the intellectual acknowledgement that a system, a global crisis, or an institution is a construct. Mattering is an entirely different mechanism. Mattering regulates the actual physiological weight your nervous system assigns to that construct.
Okay, let me try an analogy here. It's like having a volume knob on a scary movie.
That's good.
You don't have to claim that the monster on the screen isn't real within the context of the film. You just turn down the audio. Turning down the sound stops the jump scares from hijacking your nervous system. So you don't have to pretend a global disaster or a client's trauma isn't real in order to deliberately turn down the mattering dial.
And treating mattering as a binary switch is the real trap here. If you say, this doesn't matter to me at all, full stop, you are breeding corrosive, permanent cynicism.
You just stop caring entirely.
Right, but using a dial allows you to say, this crisis matters, but it matters slightly less than my miscalibrated nervous system is screaming at me right now.
That's powerful.
It is a profound mechanism for protecting your empathy, because our biological nervous systems simply were not built to absorb the simultaneous real-time suffering of the entire globe.
No, we really weren't.
Yeah.
Using the dials means you stay engaged, but you manage the physiological costs so you can actually be of use tomorrow.
Exactly.
But, and this is where things get really intense, the source text then takes us to the absolute edge of this entire psychological framework.
It does.
What happens when the dials fail? What happens when you encounter a piece of data that shatters your worldview but offers absolutely zero comfort in its place.
This is where the document reaches its most raw, vulnerable point. The author is grieving the tragic loss of their sister, Sharon.
Yeah.
And in a desperate search for answers or comfort regarding Sharon's death, the author wrestles with deep research into what they call the superverse.
Like the afterlife.
Yeah, specifically analyzing near-death experiences, or NDEs, and institutional out-of-body research. And what they find completely breaks their safety nets.
I can imagine they were looking for reassurance that their sister was at peace.
Of course.
But instead, they stumble into the theories of researchers like Michael Newton, who proposed the concept of pre-life agreements.
Which is a very tough concept.
It's the horrific idea that souls consciously choose to incarnate and actually agree to harm each other for the experience of it.
Right.
And they look at Robert Monroe's research suggesting that deception and manipulation exist even in the afterlife, meaning there's no objective truth or consensus reality even after you die.
For a person actively grieving a murdered sibling, this information causes profound moral injury. The concept of the superverse essentially strips away any hope of ultimate cosmic justice.
It makes it all feel meaningless.
Worse than meaningless. It implicitly asks the author to retroactively consent to their sister's brutal death by framing it as just experiential content for the soul.
I mean, that is viscerally disgusting. It's actually worse than cold materialism.
How so?
Well, materialism tells you the universe is a random, indifferent machine. That's bleak, sure, but it's fundamentally clean. This superverse concept offers you a grand meaning, but the meaning is openly hostile to our lived human morality. It tells you the unbearable harm inflicted on your family was a deliberate choice.
It's a terrifying thought.
How do you possibly escape that existential corner once you've seen the data?
The pragmatic escape the author discovers is to ruthlessly unbundle more reality from more meaning.
Unbundle them.
Yeah. We carry this assumption that if there is a higher multidimensional realm, it must be dripping with ultimate benevolent purpose. But what if it isn't?
What if it's just as messy as here?
Exactly. What if a superverse exists, but it is just as indifferent, brute, and chaotic as the physical universe? Just because a realm is larger or endures past physical death does not automatically mean it holds the ultimate moral verdict on your life.
Which leads to a practice the author calls epistemic hygiene.
Yes.
The idea that you can accept a piece of distressing data as possibly true, like the NDE reports, but you actively put it in quarantine. You absolutely refuse to let that data govern how you process your grief.
It's setting a boundary.
But I have to push back here. Isn't quarantining facts just a highly intellectualized justification for living in denial? I mean, how is covering your ears a healthy way to process reality?
You're touching on the exact friction of the concept. It's a very valid concern. But the author's defense is that a cosmological model does not have to be 100% empirically accurate to be functionally helpful to a human life.
Okay, I'm listening.
Quarantining isn't a denial of the fact itself. It's a denial of the fact's authority over your morality. You are choosing to live with an unresolved fact rather than surrendering to a hostile meaning.
Oh.
You don't have to justify the suffering. You don't have to force your sister's death into a grand, satisfying, cosmic frame. You hold the pen.
So the ultimate solution to the deepest pain isn't finding a perfect, comforting answer.
No.
It's having the sheer audacity to look at the terrible answers the universe offers and reject them. To stubbornly insist on upholding your own human morality and helping people anyway.
Yes. And the source refers to this defiant posture as the double shift.
The double shift.
It is the exhausting practice of helping others with one hand while fiercely kicking at the truth with the other. The author actually quotes the Canadian musician Bruce Cockburn to capture this ethos.
What's the quote?
Gotta kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight.
Kicking at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. Wow. That completely changes the goal from finding peace to maintaining your dignity. That's a lot to take in.
It is a profound refusal to accept the dark. It is maintaining the absolute dignity of demanding a moral answer from the universe, even when the universe remains entirely silent.
That sounds exhausting.
It is, but the deep exhaustion you feel from working that double shift isn't a failure on your part to find spiritual enlightenment. That exhaustion is the ultimate form of fidelity to what is good.
Yeah.
You are holding the tension, refusing the warm, simple lies of fundamentalist religion, refusing the cold, hollow emptiness of materialism, and just quietly choosing to do the next right thing for the person in front of you.
We have covered some massive, heavy territory today. Let's recap the journey of this deep dive for everyone listening.
Let's do it.
We started by mapping the 4 levels of holding beliefs, really understanding the danger of slipping from immersion into total, rigid identification.
Right, forgetting the painted glass.
Exactly. And we learned how to use the diagnostic tool of stepping outside our frameworks to test our own grip on reality.
We also explored the invisible algorithms of societal support and learned how to separate the realness dial from the mattering dial.
Which gives us a practical tool to regulate our overloaded nervous systems without losing our fundamental empathy.
And finally, we explored the incredible dignity of the double shift, the exhaustion of helping others while fiercely kicking at the darkness, choosing to live with unresolved facts instead of bowing to hostile cosmic meanings.
It is a brilliant, vital toolkit for standing firm on ground that is constantly shifting beneath your feet.
It empowers you to navigate the construct without being consumed by it.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. Something that builds on that entire discussion about the superverse.
What is it?
If we assume that ultimate meaning doesn't actually exist out there, not written in the stars, not embedded in the physical universe, and not even waiting for us in some theoretical afterlife or superverse, does that mean we are finally free?
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Right. If the universe is under absolutely no obligation to provide a neat story that resolves all our suffering and makes perfect sense, maybe that means the only meaning that will ever exist is the exact meaning you choose to build.
Wow.
Right here, today, with the people around you.
You hold the pen.
You do. So the next time you look down and realize the floor you're standing on is just a thin sheet of painted glass, remember, you're the one who gets to decide what to paint on it next. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.